It's time to tackle the classic weeaboo question, can you learn Japanese from a video game? Minasan, konnichiwa. お名前はアレックスです。今日は日本語学習ゲームをレビューします。Hello everyone, my name is Alex, and today I will be reviewing a game that aims to teach users how to speak Japanese. Wagotabi, our game for today, is not entirely unique in its goals, and arguably it's not even entirely unique in its approach. As someone who's been trying to and struggling through learning Japanese, I've seen my fair share of gamified Japanese learning tools for sure. But Wagotabi has managed to really stand out for me, so I decided we should talk about it. For some context on today's video, I've been learning Japanese on and off since I was a teenager, occasionally dropping it or finding myself without the time to consistently study, but in the last few years I've really tried to lock in and make it a daily priority, even if it's only for a short review session. Now, my vocabulary isn't too shabby if I do say so myself. I do have the advantage of going into this game already having hiragana and katakana memorized for several years at this point. I can read a lot of the N5 and elementary school level kanji, however, my grammar is lackluster to say the least. I struggle with particles and sentence order quite a bit, so while I know a ton of words, I often find myself struggling to actually piece together sentences. That is to say, I do not come into this game as a complete novice to the language, but rather that I have some significant areas I struggle in and hope to find out if Wagotabi would help. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. If you're a Pokemon fan, especially a retro Pokemon fan, I think you will pretty quickly realize how inspired this game is by the Pokemon franchise at times. The aesthetic, the writing in the opening scenes of the game, the kanji decks, and the overall goal of challenging the masters to collect their seals, or hanko, had me feeling very nostalgic for my copy of Pokemon Red. I will say though that despite the very obvious inspiration, it delivers really nicely. I think that sometimes when a game is drawing inspiration from more retro titles, it can feel a bit forced or cringy. But for me, that wasn't the case here. The inspiration, obvious as it may be, is executed phenomenally. It feels like a love letter to classic Pokemon games rather than a copy, and I can definitely appreciate that. So the game opens by teaching us about the different writing systems in the Japanese language, as well as the basic sentence structure. That last one is, as previously established, an area where I have historically struggled. I did notice as I played that I still did struggle a bit, but admittedly I think the color coding and examples introduced to us this early in the game helped a bit. After learning the sentence order, we talk to our dad, another obvious point of reference to the Pokemon series, which historically has players talk with their mom before heading off on their grand adventure. And after that talk and a little bit of a challenge, we're off to the weeaboo promised land of Japan. Something else you'll notice pretty quickly, and something that I'm personally very fond of, is the balance struck between English support and immersive learning. While you'll find that some characters talk to you in English, primarily other foreigners, a lot of the characters will primarily speak to you in Japanese. If you've ever tried to learn a language before, you've probably heard that immersion is the best method. I don't believe this to be a completely black and white thing, as I think there is a lot more nuance to the subject. However, I do believe that the flow of learning in Wagotabi encourages more success with the immersion tactics. The thing about Wagotabi is that it's structured a bit differently than you find a lot of Japanese programs. For a lot of programs that I've personally encountered, they skip straight over hiragana and katakana and straight into vocabulary and phrases, or, in some cases, they have you learn all 92 basic hiragana and katakana characters up front, which, while this is personally how I chose to approach Japanese when I started getting more serious about it, and I definitely do think this is better than throwing someone straight into full words and phrases, hoping they just pick up on kana as they go, I don't think it's always the most effective approach. as it is quite a lot to memorize, and I think a lot of learners are so eager to get to actual vocabulary that they end up rushing through the kana and not actually retaining them. Wagotabi strikes a much needed yet rarely met balance between these two. Wagotabi teaches kana as you encounter them in the words, which I think is much more akin to how native English speakers learn to read. When you were a baby, your grown-ups didn't sit down and teach you the alphabet before they ever even considered reading a book to you. They read you books with simple words and sentences. Then later, as you started speaking and noticing words around you, you started to learn individual letters and their sounds. Conversely, Wagotabi will introduce a word, then break that word down kana by kana to give you the opportunity to learn each sound as it comes up. This is also good because it's not like you're going to learn a sound or character and then not see or hear it again for another 3 weeks. The kana you learn are relevant to the situation at the time, and then you'll continue seeing them throughout the game. I believe that this method is much more effective in memorization, leading a higher retention than other programs and methods. Now, maybe I'm biased on this. Again, I personally did already have hiragana and katakana memorized coming into this, so I didn't personally need to rely on this method, and was able to skip over learning most of the kana in words because of this. But to me, it makes sense why the game teaches this way, and I think it's a fantastic idea. Another method that the game employs, which I think is fantastic, are smart tests. Smart tests work by using a built-in spaced repetition system, also known as an SRS. Users will be prompted to do a retest on certain words and phrases at certain timed intervals based on their progress and success with the content on previous smart tests. If you are struggling with a word, Wagotabi's SRS system will prompt you to test on that word sooner, but if you're repeatedly doing fine with the word, it will increase the time before it tests you on the word again. Now, Wagotabi is not the first program I have used that uses spaced repetition methods. And I'm going to tell you right now, this is one of my favorite methods I see implemented in Japanese learning software. I really wish this method was more common. Several years ago, I started using a web-based program called Wanikani, which I personally was a big fan of. And the only reason I don't still use it is because beyond the 3rd level of kanji, Wanikani is paywalled, and I've never been able to justify the cost of a membership to keep going. I am very happy to now have a much cheaper alternative that uses one of the same teaching methods that made me so fond of Wanikani, as I truly believe that this method is one of the most effective ways to learn. Of course, I would be a fool if I didn't talk more about one of the primary ways that Wagotabi keeps users engaged, and that is obviously the story. I mentioned it briefly before, but Wagotabi is an RPG that feels very much akin to the Pokemon franchise, but instead of filling a Pokédex by catching all the Pokemon, you fill your kanji dex by learning new words and phrases. Your ultimate goal is to visit all 47 prefectures of Japan and challenge all 47 masters, collecting their hanko to prove yourself as a Grand Master. I think that the progression of the story and the RPG elements, as well as the fact that the game is actually set in Japan, encourages users to keep going more effectively than other programs. The desire to not leave the story unfinished and to see more of the country of Japan is, I think, one of the biggest driving factors for players to continue their learning journey through Wagotabi. Now, I want to be transparent about some things. This game is not complete. It is currently very much playable with enough content to keep players going for several hours. However, according to the development timeline, we do not currently have even all of the N5 level content planned for the game. For the uninitiated, N5 refers to the levels of the Japanese Language Proficiency Test, or the JLPT, which is fairly universally the standardized test for measuring Japanese proficiency across the globe. This test is taken twice a year on the same day at various locations internationally, and it has 5 levels, with N5 being the easiest and N1 being the most difficult. The developers do plan to hopefully implement at minimum the full N5 and N4 content, possibly going higher if the game is popular enough and has enough support. I don't think I have to tell anyone this, but developing games is not free. So, it makes sense that further content would rely on support for the game. While I do believe we should hold AAA studios to a higher standard, it is understandable to break up development into phases when we are talking about small indie studios, and I will always lower my bar of expectations when it comes to these smaller teams, not because I don't believe indie games can't be as good or meet those same expectations. On the contrary, I actually believe a lot of indie games are better than their AAA counterparts. However, there is a lot more risk when it comes to indie games. One badly performing game is unlikely to bankrupt companies like Nintendo or Blizzard. The same cannot be said for indie studios, and because of that, I am very much fine with indies partaking in risk assessment and management when it comes to their development timelines. That said, of course, this means that the more support there is for Wagotabi, the better the odds are that we will see further content for the game, and honestly, they're not off to a bad start. Across Steam and Android alone, Wagotabi has seen over 10,000 downloads and 10,000 wishlists, and they even have the support of Kanagawa Prefecture in Japan. I think it's also worth mentioning that they have partnered with hundreds of actual Japanese teachers, both native and foreign, to ensure accuracy and efficacy in their teaching methods. So realistically, this game has the potential to be one of the best Japanese language learning tools on the market. I really hope that they will continue to see this support. Personally, I discovered Wagotabi by scrolling my TikTok feed and coming across a creator playing the game on livestream, which prompted me to give the demo a spin. Which, yes, speaking of the demo, this game has a demo available on Steam, and I really encourage you to go give it a try and see if you think this game could be a match for you on your Japanese learning journey. I actually initially planned for Wagotabi to be part of the Alex's Demoing series. However, after I enjoyed the demo so much, I decided to just plunge straight into the full game. And I'm really glad I did. The teaching methods, the engaging story, and the nostalgic gameplay are all absolutely phenomenal. Has this game made me a master in Japanese? No. I'm still using study tools, I'm still taking notes, and I'm still double and triple checking my translations. But, do I think this game is an effective learning tool for Japanese? Absolutely. I think if you're someone who has wanted to learn Japanese but didn't know where to start, or if you're someone who set out with the New Year's resolution to learn a new language, I would 100% recommend giving this title a try. Wagotabi is currently available on Steam, Apple, and Google Play, with the developer having plans to later possibly bring the game to the Nintendo Switch family of consoles, and it's only $10 for the full version over on Steam. So please really consider giving it a go, and of course make sure to check out the Wagotabi website, which I have linked in the description down below. Anyways, I think that about wraps up my thoughts on Wagotabi. As always, thank you for your support, and until next time, stay cozy,